Hi scholars, let's look at TEK 4.7c. It says, I can determine the approximate measurements of angles and degrees to the nearest whole number using a protractor. Now, in my other video on drawing angles, I used a protractor, but for this one, I'm actually going to use these papers that have protractors already drawn on them because it's really hard for me to show you with the protractor, like me holding an actual protractor over the angle. So it's easier if I just have one already on there. This is exactly what it would look like if a protractor would just stay on the paper. So I'm better off just doing this. So let's get started. So let me go through the steps. When you're determining the measure of an angle, your first question you need to ask yourself is it acute, which is less than a right angle? Is it exactly a right angle, which is the letter L? Or is it obtuse, which is greater than a right angle? If you don't know what angles are, I strongly suggest you watch that video first before you move on to this. Your second step is to write the range. So as soon as you determine if it's acute, right, or obtuse, I want you to write the range next to it. And then the third step is if it's starting at 0, go from 0 and up to a stopping point. And if not, count by 5s and extras on the sides. Don't worry about this one. Just focus on this one. I'm going to go over this one more first. Okay, I will bring up an example of this so you can see what I'm talking about, but we're really going to focus on step 1, 2, and the first part of 3, and then I'll show you step 1 and 2, and then this kind of example. So let's look at this one here. Okay, so I have this protractor drawing, and there's an angle. And what you would do is, first the angle would be by itself. You would place the protractor on top. And you would make sure that the bottom part of your protractor is lined up with that bottom angle to help you measure. Okay, so first question you have to ask yourself, is this angle acute, right, or obtuse? And from the looks of it, it is an acute angle because a right angle would be like that, okay, and mine is less than that. So the second thing I need to do is write the range. If it's an acute angle, it's 1 through 89, so I'm going to write that over here. And I always make my students do this because it's a good strategy just to kind of refresh your memory. So if it's 1 through 89, my answer will be somewhere in 1 through 89. So if I randomly get something like 100 and something as my answer, I did something wrong. Okay, so let's kind of look at it more carefully. So when you look at this, it says here, if starting at 0, go from 0 and up to the stopping point. So looking at this, it is starting at 0. Okay, I want you to ignore that 180. I want you to focus on that 0. I always tell my students, circle that 0. And then you want to go up. Okay, stay on this side of the protractor. If you're starting at 0, then it's going 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. If you start at 180, that's incorrect because 180 is like the end of a huge angle. Okay, so 0, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, and notice it stops at 60. So this is a 60-degree angle. It's that easy. It's that simple. Let's look at another example. I purposely want you to see it this way. Same concept. Is this acute, right, or obtuse? So I'm going to write this is acute. Write the range. It's going to be between 1 through 89 degrees because 90 degrees is a right angle. Next step is if starting at 0, go from 0 and up to the stopping point. So here is 0. Notice it's on this side. When we were over here on that other one, it was over here. That's because when you start here, it goes 0, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 110, 120, 130, 140, 150, 160, 170, 180. But when you start over here, which is this angle starts on this side, you have to look at the top part, 0, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100, and so on to 180. So if your angle's starting over here, you have to look on the top part of the protractor. If your angle starts over here, like the last example, you look at the inside of the protractor. So looking at this, starting at 0, count up, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60-degree angle. This is a 60-degree angle. So this is exactly like this angle. I just wanted you to see that it starts the other way. And so you can get the same answer. All right, let's look at one more like this. So looking at this, you know, it looks small. It looks very narrow. So I'm going to write that it's an acute angle. And if it's acute, my answer will be between 1 and 89. Notice that when I got 60 degrees as my answer on this one, it was between 1 through 89. So that's an accurate, reasonable answer. Very, very important that you do that. So looking at this, it says if starting at 0, go from 0 and up to the stopping point. But you know what? This isn't starting at 0. It doesn't start here. It doesn't start there. It's kind of random in the middle. So it says if not, count by 5s and extras on the side. So let me explain what that means. You want to create little petals that show 5s. So right here, this one starts right on the line. So from here to here, that's 5. Okay, because 60 to 70 is 10, so I'm going to do 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 55, 60. So this is also a 60-degree angle, but notice it's in a completely different form as the other one. These are both 60-degree angles, but one is starting at 0 going like that, and this one is like randomly in the middle. Okay, so be prepared. You have to use one or the other strategy. You have to make that decision when you look at it. Let's look at more examples. Okay, let's look at this example. Step 1, determine if it's acute, right, or obtuse. Looking at this, it's less than a right angle, so I'm going to say it's acute, which means my answer will be between 1 through 89. So it says if starting at 0, look at 0 and go up to the stopping point. So here is 0. I'm going to circle that. And sometimes I do this to kind of show like I'm staying on this side. Because sometimes like if you see too many numbers, especially like if you get overwhelmed and jumble things easily, you know you're supposed to start at 0, but you end up looking at the top part and then you end up saying like 110 or something like that as your answer. So 0, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. Notice this is not right on 70. If it was right on 70, it would actually be on that line. Do you see how it's one little degree more? So this would be 71 degrees. A lot of people say 69. The reason why it's not 69 is because 69 is actually one less than 70. That arrow I just drew is 69 degrees. So it's like 0, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 61, 62, 63, 64, 65, 66, 67, 68, 69. But if you keep going, it's 70, 71. So 71 degrees is the amount for this angle. And 71 is between 1 and 89, so this is a reasonable answer. All right, let's look at another example. Let's look at this one. Let's change it up. All right, this one right here. Notice it is wider than a 90-degree angle. So this is actually obtuse. So if it's obtuse, my answer is going to be between 91 and 179. Okay, so I know my answer has to be greater than 90. But let's use some more reasonability. It's not going to be 179 because if it was 179, this angle would be way over here close to 180. Okay, we know that it's not going to be like very high. It's going to be a little bit more than 90. So same thing, if starting at 0, go from 0 and up to the stopping point. So it is starting at 0 right here. So 0, 10, I'm going to circle that and I'm going to separate it just so I know. Or you can even cross it out. I mean, you do what works for you. 0, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, obviously more than that. It is 100, and then there's one little space more than 100, so this is a 101-degree angle. A lot of people will say 99. If it was 99, this would be 99, because if you have 90, you have 91, 92, 90, I'm going to skip over 95, 96, 97, 98, 99. 100, 101. Okay? Let's look at some more examples. Let's look at this one. This one is much more wider than the last one. I know for sure it's obtuse, so my answer will be between 91 and 179. By the way, on the last one, we said this was 101. That is between that, so that is a reasonable answer before moving on and selecting my answer. Okay, so obtuse. I've declared the angle. I've declared the range. Now it says start at 0 and go up. So 0, I'm going to cross out the part that I don't want to look at. That will confuse me. So, we're at 130, 140, 141, 142, 143. It's when you're counting those little spaces after that get a little confusing. When you're right at the tens, the multiples of tens, super easy to measure. It's the ones after, because as answer choices, I guarantee you, like on your assignments that your teacher may have for you, such as me, I would have obviously the correct answer as an answer choice. I would have like 137, because I know my students might think, well, that's 140. 3 less than 140 is 137. So, they have to be aware that 137 is over here. So I would put that as an answer choice. And if they're not reading the protractor carefully, I would also put something like, well, let's use that top number. So like 43 could be an answer choice, or even 37 if you read the top part of the protractor. So always got to be aware and careful. But if you recognize that it's an obtuse angle, you know not to pick A or D. You know it's either C or B. And if you follow the steps, then you should be okay. Let's go over one more where you're using the steps with this. So again, recognize. I want you to do this one real quick. Spend a few minutes. Okay? Hopefully you realize this is an acute angle, which means my answer will be between 1 through 89, which means I'm not going to be reading this side of the protractor. Okay, starting at 0, 0, 10, 20, 30, 40, and then there's one little piece after it, so 41 degrees is my answer. I wanted to talk about this one. Sometimes you might see a mix of angles, and if you've seen my angles video, I always tell you that the middle part, like this is the beginning, this is the middle, and this is the end of your angle. So if they want angle EFG, EFG, this is the angle you need to focus on. Don't worry about those. So, make sure you pay attention to the types of angles. So it's acute, it's an acute angle. 1 through 89 is where my answer range will be. Starting at 0, notice this is on the top part of the protractor. So I'm going to cross out the junk that I don't want to read. 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. Notice it's not at 70. It's actually one less than 70. So 69 degrees. So let's look at this one. Let's just, for whatever, let's just go ahead and do this. This is also acute. 1 through 89 is going to be my answer. Start at 0, so I'm not going to look at this side of the protractor. Okay, 0, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 51, 52, 53, 54, 55. So it is 55 degrees. Okay, let's talk about this one. It says find angle WYZ. Okay, I want you to ignore this part. We'll talk about that later. Actually, I don't want to do WYZ. I want to do angle XYW or WYX. So in this situation, you still need to determine what kind of angle it is. It's acute, which means my answer will be 1 through 89. But is it starting at 0? That's the tricky part. It's not. So my steps were count by 5s and the extras on the side. So let me explain what that means. Find any full 5 degrees. So that's a full 5 within like my range. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40. I have a guaranteed 40 degrees. Now over here, do you see how there's that one tiny little spot on the side? That's going to be plus 1. And then count over here. 1, 2, 3. Plus 3. So 44 degrees total for this answer. This angle is 44 degrees. Okay, so this is how you would do it if it doesn't start at 0. You have to count the 5s that are full, and then count the little extras that don't jump to 5 completely. Let's look at another example. Okay, looking at this, let's say we're told to find angle ABD. So you want to recognize this is acute. It's 1 through 89. Okay, we're looking at this right here, not the whole thing. So, if they wanted us to find this angle, it would be easy because you start at 0, but they want us to find this one, so it's different. So 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 55. I'm not going to do this one to this one because this is the next 5 and it doesn't go there. So 51, 52, or 1, 2, 3, 4. So that was 55 plus 4 equals 59 degrees. Just a quick example, because I wasn't able to use it in my other video where you're supposed to draw angles. I used protractors, and I know that was kind of hard for a lot of you to see in my video. So just pretend that this is a clear protractor on computer paper, and you need to draw 55 degrees and label it JKL. So you would want to start at 0 and connect it, okay? And then since it's an acute angle, you need to stay below the 90. So that means you need to focus on the top part of the protractor. So 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. 55 is right here. You can put a dot there. And then you would pick up your protractor and then, whoops, I'm doing a very messy job, and then connect it. Like you would draw the dot at the top of the protractor, pick up the protractor, and then connect the lines. So just an example so you can see, what it would look like.